I'm libertarian in that I want less regulation. I think these industries are too heavily regulated. I'm not so sure about the politics of it. It seems to me the nuclear regulation is completely crazy. I think there were all these ways it was caught up in the dual use of nuclear reactors for building nuclear weapons, and people were scared of a nuclear war, and they should have been. And somehow the fear got misplaced from, thermonuclear, the blast, to the radiation, to the fallout, to the quaternary thing was just the nuclear power plants. And that was the thing somehow people fixated on. And that's roughly what I believe happened in, the 1970s and 1980s when the nuclear industry really got derailed. I think it could have gone differently. I'm not so sure it could have gone that radically different. The version of it that I always zero in on is the nuclear one. I think there's a lot of complexity around the costs of the syn fuels. I think it never quite got economical. Then there's a counter argument where maybe it was because you burdened it with too many environmental regulations. But it was sort of somehow. But the one that I keep thinking is just cleaner. No matter what you think.
I agree.
Climate change is nuclear, and the amazing one is that one, I believe there's not been we've had a few nuclear reactors built over the last 40 years, but not a single new design has been approved. And if you can't innovate, you're probably not going to get nuclear to work, and if you're not going to get nuclear to work, I think you're not going to get the energy future to work at all. So I would always zero in on the nuclear thing a lot more.
Yeah, me too. It's a big focus. I mean, I think with nuclear, a big thing is just getting the policy right. And I think a lot of people have criticisms of the establishment, but there's a question of what should nuclear policy be, and that's kind of one of the frontiers of my work now.
It's probably, yeah, well, it's certainly my instinct, and maybe it's too facile on my part, but it's always my instinct that when people, if people are concerned about climate change, all these things, if they're not wildly pro-nuclear, I'm always biased to think they're simply acting out of bad faith.
I think it's the litmus test, particularly if you take it as a category, because it's one thing to say, oh, this particular reactor, but being against fissioning,
sure,
and as such, or even using nuclei
sure.
as such, that is just a giveaway. If you have, even like we have Robert F. Kennedy, who's sort of become a mini darling of some parts of the right, but like you just listen to him, like he has a generic hostility toward anything nuclear, and I think that betrays very anti-technology perspective.
It was all the original environmental debates from the 70s, and somehow the people who came of age during that time never learned anything new.
Yeah. So let's talk about the green movement a little bit.
But it is, if we're going to have a 21st century that is successful, I think it will somehow look different in a physical, material way from the 20th century. And then the energy version would be that it would physically look different. And my intuition is that we have, maybe we have lots of forests and a few nuclear power plants, and then that power the whole country, versus we've chopped down all the trees and covered them with solar panels that barely work, or something like this. But there's sort of a concrete, or we have windmills polluting the entire coast, just uglifying the landscape. And but there's sort of like a picture of what our society, what the future looks like, and we're hesitant to push too specific a picture because we're not in favor of centralized government. We don't want to dictate this or something like that. And at the same time, I think this is one of the weaknesses on our side, is that we don't actually have, and we'll know it when we see it, but we don't have a concrete picture of how this different world will look like, and then the other side surely does.